Our weed of the week is a really tough one to identify. It is lead plant.
I don't think it's so tough to identify. It's just that most people aren't used to having this in a row crop situation. So it's not one of those weeds that you had to pull as a kid walking beans, or not one of those weeds that you had out in your alfalfa field, for example. But
so you don't have any good stories about this?
Well, I do, Brian, because it's a weed, and I just hate all of them. So we're going to tell you how to control lead plant in just a minute. But first I want to tell you about where you're going to see it. Where I usually see lead plant is out in pastures or ditches or open areas. And the thing with lead plant, the old settlers used to look at lead plant and they'd say, oh boy, there's going to be some lead ore there in the soil. Well, I don't care about lead ore. But what I can tell you is usually it's the higher fertility parts of the pastures. And a lot of times if you've got some lead plant out there, you've probably overgrazed that pasture. It was a good place for the cattle to eat. They had lots of grass, and now there's no competition for the lead plant to get going. It doesn't mean that your pasture is a bad pasture. It just means that you could have managed it a little bit different and you wouldn't have had so many problems with lead plant. And the same could be true with some of the other tough to control pasture weeds too. Now with lead plant, it is a relative of the pea family, and like any of those members of the pea family, it's a legume. So it's going to produce nitrogen with bacteria in the soil. It has that symbiotic relationship, kind of like soybeans do. That makes it kind of an interesting plant, but it's also one thing about CRP ground and some of that type of ground when it comes to weed control. If you didn't want to kill the lead plant, but you wanted to control the other weeds out there, good luck.
Well, here's the real problem with lead plant. Not only is it a perennial weed, it's also considered a shrub, a deciduous shrub. So when we've got a perennial and a shrub, that's really difficult. So not only do most herbicides not control this weed, Roundup is not that good on it because it's a shrub. Fortunately though, we don't have it in crop ground very much. If you have it in pastures, our number one recommendation would be to use Tordon. Keep in mind though that Tordon is lethal to trees and you can't use it near water because it kills fish. But if you can use Tordon, that's a great option. That would be our number one choice. Otherwise, use high rates of 2,4-D multiple times per year.
Well, I was just saying a legume plant, if you've got a CRP situation, you want to save some alfalfa or something like that, you can't do that and kill the lead plant at the same time because you're going to have to use something like a high rate of 2,4-D, maybe a Tordon or a Grazon too. But in most cases, guys are using a real high rate of 2,4-D and you're going to smoke everything else out there that's a broadleaf.
Well, once again, our weed of the week is lead plant. It's a perennial shrub. You're going to need Tordon or 2,4-D to control it.
Well, that's it for our weed of the week, but there's more Ag PhD to come right after this.